We are
It's
live.
Peter Mead, and welcome to the Australian Search Marketing Academy.
Boop, boop, boop.
Together with our guests, Harry Sanders, Jimmy Page, Nick Ranger. Super important topic today, creating a winning SEO strategy in 2021. And we have the perfect experts to help us with this topic. And I will start by introducing Jimmy Page. He's the founder and CEO of Inceive Interactive, a San Diego-based digital marketing agency. Hi, Jimmy. Welcome. Thanks for joining us from the USA.
Thanks, Peter. Hi to you too. Very happy to be here.
Great. And as mentioned previously, we don't actually have any kangaroos in the background. But yeah, so we'll have to see what happens later on. I'd like to also introduce Harry Sanders. I've known Harry for quite a while, worked with Harry on a regular basis. He's the founder and director of Studio Hawk and is a multi-award winning SEO. So very happy to have you joining us on the show, Harry. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Always an honor to be here.
And Nick Ranger, our co-host, regular, expert, I guess, on the show. And I regularly defer to Nick Ranger for the definitive answer to a lot of things on the show. So, and she's an amazing technical SEO. And I've personally had experience working with her on doing things like migrating millions of URLs.
Finding it out in the trenches, bud. It's great to be here as always. And I'm really excited to go through this. I think we always, every single time, I know November, December, and some people even as early as September are starting to look at all their URLs and just be like, oh, cool, let's change. Let's update the content. Let's change from 2020 to 2021, and that's no different to here. So, really, really great to start this with Jimmy and Harry and 2021, powerful SEO strategy.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, today we're really diving into some great strategy with Jimmy Page and Harry Sanders. I mean, yes, we're obviously looking at a bit more of a strategy instead of going to your URL and changing the date from 2020 to 2021, and then there's your strategy for the year. Obviously, we're looking for. We're very interested to find out. So let's get started. Jimmy, are you ready to give us the first part of this presentation, and then we'll follow up with Harry with a whole lot of practical implementation stuff afterwards?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I certainly hope I'm ready.
Great.
Go ahead. Share the screen here. All right. Looking good?
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah, that looks like presentation mode. It looks fantastic.
Perfect. All right. Jimmy Page, ladies and gentlemen.
Awesome. Thanks for bearing with me there, everyone. And thanks so much to everyone on the webinar today for joining us. Again, my name is Jimmy Page. I'm the CEO of a company in San Diego, primarily an SEO agency called Inceive Interactive. So we're up here in the US for a lot of you. My email address, jpageinceive.com. I'll give it to you again at the end here. If there's anything that you're interested in more thought on, collaborating on, just reaching out to me to say hi, feel free to email me at that address at any point. My company works with all types of different companies. So just to preface the presentation here, I'm going to try to talk to everyone from people who are at home with their own Shopify sites or WordPress affiliate sites, just getting started with some kind of a new business or, those kinds of ventures, all the way up to, people who are building their plans for large corporations. We work with e-commerce companies. We work with lead generation companies, everything in between. So really going to try to make sure that we're putting the story about strategy together for everyone here. I'm going to really focus my presentation on high level, think about strategy, think about a business approach this year before you kind of start throwing money at SEO initiatives or deciding what URLs to change on your site. Really talk about a framework for how you think through a strategy for the year. And then we're going to turn it over to Harry, and he's going to get into some more execution specifics of things that you really should and need to be thinking about this year that are on the forefront of SEO. So I want to urge everyone to start, as someone who's seen hundreds, if not thousands of companies put SEO strategies into place. I think it's really important for everyone to start by understanding what is actually possible and by really putting bookends on, who are the smallest people in the industry, who are the largest, what do they look like, how did they get there? Understand what you're trying to accomplish in a business context and really be able to frame that up for people at your company, or even if it's just for yourself. What am I looking to get out of doing anything with SEO? Want to give a high level perspective on how you get into looking at what specific opportunities are, prioritizing them, putting together plans to actually pull the levers that you're going to need to pull throughout the year. Assess the resources that you have. For some of you, that might be yourself, and maybe you can get a couple of $100s together here and there for isolated SEO projects. For others, you may have tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to put to work on initiatives that impact the organic profile. And then you want to align the most important actions from all of that work to the resources that are available in front of you. So what's the most someone could achieve? What do I need to achieve? What on and off-site opportunities exist? What people in tech do I have that, or what people in tech do I need that can tackle that set of opportunities? And then aligning who are those people with what are those opportunities, and looking at really, if I do that, if I make that investment in doing these things to accomplish these things, am I going to get a business result that I'm ultimately happy with? I want to make sure that to start in this macro level of understanding, what are the opportunities? We actually use Semrush. I'm not just doing this for this presentation. This is exactly how my company goes about this kind of thing in significantly more depth using Semrush, but wanted to show an example today of how this works for us. So on the left-hand side, I used kind of pickleball as an example here, not for any reason, but seems to be getting more and more popular in the US. So if I'm thinking about pickleball, I really want to get a sense of, are there people in the industry that are growing? And if there are people that are growing, have large profiles, and potentially are growing fast, I'd like to identify them. I'd also like to look at people who may be smaller like myself and find out what that ecosystem starts to look like. So I have a sense of, well, the biggest players here might be at X size, right? You can see on the left examples of a company that has $50,000 in what we call paid traffic equivalency. It's Semrush's example of sort of how much traffic are you getting and how much would you pay for that specific traffic in paid search. And you start to see a big spectrum of absolute sizes across the industry in value of traffic. You also start to see in the same views trajectories of companies. You can see who has put together successful SEO campaigns, right? Or maybe they're not successful SEO campaigns, but maybe they are, growing extremely quickly from a brand standpoint, and there are things that we want to look at there. So getting this view one at a time of the people who have significant rankings in your vertical is really important, and an important way to start. And I like to do it at the beginning of every year to get a sense of where you're stacking up. And then on the right, you really start to get more of a sense for, in the top chart, how much traffic do these people have, or do these competitors have? And what does the nature of that profile look like? For example, here you see pickleball.com ranking for a small number of keywords, but very important and expensive keywords. And then on, towards the right of this chart, you see Pickleball Central, who has somehow built out a big long tail of ranking keywords, but not necessarily, getting as much traffic from them. So these are the types of things at a high level that you want to understand before you start digging into specific competitors. The chart at the bottom here starts to give you a sense of how much overlap there is between, could be you, could be the 3 biggest existing people. This tool is really great for letting you be flexible about what you look at. How much overlap exists you could use for all kinds of different things to understand the environment. This is the same kind of an approach. Paddleball Galaxy, Pickleball Galaxy, pickleball.com, all on one chart, just looking at authority and referring domains kind of being one of the most important metrics when it comes to gauging authority if you're going to use kind of a single metric. And you can see how much gap there might be between you. So you start to get a sense for these really big competitors that are ranking for really important and sort of valuable terms from a traffic equivalency standpoint are also ahead of me by 600 or so linking domains. And a big part of what I need to be thinking about is, how do I close that gap? And can I really afford to close that gap in a meaningful way this year? Take these high-level things that you're looking at and start to turn them into business goals. So, for example, I might want to close the gap of traffic value or paid traffic equivalency to a certain competitor by half, or revenue on a specific product line through non-brand search rankings by 25% year-over-year when those things have been flat in the recent history. Or I want to increase leads from organic entries to a specific type of page on the site. So important to have those business goals that could be you, could be many other people in the company care about, like revenue, profit, lead generation, but also to be breaking them down for the, as the person who's running the SEO strategy, into chunks that are a bit more specific. And then you get into, what do we actually need to do? And so a lot of Harry's presentation is going to be focused on this. Obviously, a lot of the nuts and bolts of making this happen are tied up in this concept. So I can't address it with one slide, but at my agency, we spend anywhere between 80 and 160 hours of time, depending on the size and characteristics of a website, looking on and around the site and at the competitive landscape to generate 12 months of plans. So this is something that we actually do in annual chunks, in keeping with the strategy in 2021. We do it every year. Look at every single thing that there is across relevancy, authority, technical SEO, UI, UX, mobile versus web, all of these things. Really look at what competitors have done to be successful and how market share may have shifted over the past year, and use all of those things to re-strategize. So we put everything into research projects that look like thesis papers that all culminate in, here's a fact, here's an insight from that fact, here's an action. And I would really encourage everyone to use that framework as you're doing research. What do I know? What does that actually mean? And what do I need to do? In reality, if you're kind of new to SEO, building a plan is something that you're going to need someone who really knows SEO to do. If you are an experienced SEO, you might be the person who's building these plans yourself. And if there are a lot of things that you could do, if you look at the biggest person in your industry and they have a site that has 20,000 more pages on it than you do, still document things I could do. I could build out 10,000 more pages of architecture, right? Even if you can't do them this year. Culminate in a price list of everything you can do that you think you can do this year, assigned to the right people. And that kind of really starts to kick you off for your execution phases. If you want to go to tiny.cc/in-sieve research, you can see an example of how we structure these. They're custom structured depending on the website, but it gives you a really good framework for how to go through and start conducting some of that research. The most important thing, I would say, especially at the corporate level, but really at every level, is to think through, to actually be successful in SEO, there is a set of kind of on-page actions and best practices that any SEO could coach you on. The reality is that being continually generating more and more visibility, revenue, rankings, etc. in organic search takes a lot of work across authority building, content creation, UI UX work on the site, things that you can't tend to do with one person or really even a couple of people. They tend to be very varied skill sets. And so why we see most companies fail is that they make their investments in what we would call strategy and sort of alignment of best practices, the things that we've talked about so far, but they don't invest as much or as well across all of the things that they need to coordinate to actually make a plan happen. So you need to think through, these are all the skill sets that have to be in my resource stack, how to get them. If you're very small, you might be getting them purely through a freelancer model. If you're a little bit larger, you may be getting them through an agency like ours. You may be getting them through fully in-house teams. So critically important to be thinking, where do I get these dedicated resources from? And make sure that your annual planning aligns with who's available and what's available. And to the degree that you can, that your annual planning actually impacts what resources you're able to gather and prepare for the year. So I encourage anyone to actually conduct a research project, figure out what you think are all of the things that you can do, and lay them out across 12 months. Figure out how much you think they're going to cost, however they're going to cost that for you with whatever types of resources, and get a clear view of, this is what I'm going to invest. These are the areas. You can, of course, change that every month. We have a great framework for planning it over 12 months and changing it every single month. But you want to really have that clear view of, this is what I was hoping to accomplish at the beginning of the year for a certain reason. This is where I wanted to place the investments across time to take out kind of low-hanging fruit first and most aligned goals. And I would recommend that everyone puts a view together like the one that you see here. It's very small because it needs to fit on one slide, but these things tend to be really large in a spreadsheet. So what you know now is find out what results you really need in your definitions, but in the definitions of the people you work with that you're going to need to explain things to. What is possible with what actions, understand who's making what gains in the industry, how big are those gains, figure out, who exactly is going to execute on the actions that you've identified to accomplish those business goals, and lay it out over time so that you have a clear view of what your initial expectations were, and those things can change incrementally over time. And now it's time for execution. From there, it really is making it happen, right? I think everyone should start with this kind of strategic project. Obviously, the devil is in the details and really actually being able to make it happen over time. So Harry's going to talk to you about a lot of the specific things that you should be taking a look at this year. Again, this is my email address. You could probably get a recording of this pretty easily if you need to go back and find it. Sincerely appreciate everyone's time on the webinar here today.
Thank you, Jimmy. Well, it's given us an awesome overview of the strategy. I do have a very quick follow-up question, because I guess what I do hear some people saying is, I mean, obviously doing these kind of strategies can be fairly time consuming, as you spoke about, the time and effort that you put into this stuff. And what do you say, or how do you convince people that time is really worth it versus them cutting back and having a really lean, basic strategy? You know, how do you convince them to put that time and effort into really spending the time on this?
It's a good question. I think, you know, getting best practices in line doesn't hurt. You may find in a lot of cases that it doesn't drive the results that you want. And after you do those basic things, you may be looking for a next step, right? I think if you start with a framework like this, it will build a view of really what you need to do. And it may not just be a simple set of best practice things to do to your existing website. And I'll also say that, you know, we see a lot of companies who their approach is really just to kind of come up with things to do, have a list of those things to do. Company gets them done when they can. And at the end of the year, like maybe there's really no progress that's measurable. And so having this type of a framework allows you to really clearly show where you want to get to and know if you're not getting there, you know, there's a gap. Some of it comes down to treating it like a marketing channel versus, you know, just trying to do something to get best practices in line with your site. And I'm not here to say that that's not okay if you have really, really limited resources. But if you can look at this more as a marketing channel that you want to grow over time, I would encourage you to go through a process like this.
Great. Nick Ranger, do you have any comments, and would you like to introduce Harry and get Harry started?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it when we're sort of looking at the macro, the overall picture of this, because I love that diagram that you did that sort of like broke down all the different things that you can sort of look at when we're considering like a good strategy, and particularly for this year, looking at your own marketing, arsenal and who you've got on your team. For an SEO kind of, just a broader look at that, at the macro. For me, it's like, it's backlinks to that, deals with the authority of your site, the technical SEO, whether or not there's, your site is indeed healthy or not, which Semrush does a really good job of just kind of having a bit of a sneak peek underneath the hood with its site audit tool. And also just looking at the content of your website, whether it's good quality for users, and having a look at the keywords that you actually rank for. Search intent is a massive thing, and I think Harry is one of the masters of unpacking this. So yeah, I will segue with that kind of like segueing comments to Mr. Harry Sanders to go through the implementation of the fantastic principles that Jimmy has laid out.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick, and thanks everyone for your time. I want to start out with a bit of a game that will actually demonstrate a little bit of search intent for you here as well. Two birds, one stone. So I've got a couple different logos on my screen right now. We're looking at search volume. Now, this is Australian data, but it is pretty similar globally. And the first one, and this is a really good example of search intent, is YouTube versus TikTok. How many people do you think, or actually, better yet, who do you think gets more searches a month?
Can we have a buzzer system?
Mate, I wish. A lot of people do think it's TikTok on this one because TikTok is massive, but that's where we talk about search intent. Yeah. People go to the App Store or download TikTok. YouTube is a collection of videos, and more people are likely to Google YouTube to go there, more navigational search intent. F45 versus CrossFit. This is a bit more of a simpler one, who gets more people coming through. And in this case, it is actually F45. So very interesting there, the difference that organic can have. This one hits close to home, actually. We got Dota 2 versus League of Legends here. And it is with a heavy heart that I do say that League of Legends, unfortunately, does get more people searching for it every month. Now, how do we perform and how do we go into this? So I'm going to the nuts and bolts of this executional side of things. We've got a bit of a strategy. We kind of need to know where things are at. So I'm going to keep it really simple here so that everyone from your really small practitioners to your massive kind of teams can look at this and follow along. So the first thing we want to do is start by running an audit report. All right, go to Semrush. We want an audit report. It'll take a few minutes, and it's going to come back with this, right? A lot of you might have done this. Some of you may have never touched this. Then we're going to go through the issues. So the errors, warnings, and notices. And this is how we're going to come up with our game plan, guys. So it's important that we run through this. Once we've got that and we can see all those errors, we can see those internal links are broken there. We can see those issues with incorrect href layings and these different things, duplicate content issues here. We can then look at our thematic score. So we can go our crawlability, our performance, all these different things. Now, this is a part of Semrush that I think a lot of people don't really look at, but please look at these different scores and get an understanding of what's going on here, because they are important and they will, I promise you, in a moment, they will all make sense. Once we've got that, we want to analyze each of these different reports. Our page crawl depth, which is how many clicks like a product page or a category page or a service page might take to get to from your website. Now, a really handy guide here is you want most things, in fact, you want everything, not just most things, you want everything on your site to be within 2 to 3 clicks. 2 optimally, 3 at a maximum. So try and squeeze that in. Find out how you can play with your information architecture or the structure of your site to start squeezing that in. We can see our strong pages, we can see our medium pages, and we can see our weak pages. And if you look at these pages and you're saying, oh, there's a common theme here that these are the products that I'm not selling, bam, there you go, straight in. We can put that in and start actioning these things as well. Then we've got to review the list of issues by page. So we can actually start looking page by page where these issues coming from. Now, your home page is really important. So look at that. Look at your service pages. Look at your product pages or your category pages if you're e-com. And again, you can start building out a bit of a repertoire. Now we want to start fixing these issues. So we could start looking at these issues and going through and really coming up with our executional plan of what we're going to fix and how. Now, I would highly recommend you start with those errors and then look at those warnings, and those notices are more of a glancing. They might be relevant to you, they might not. This is where what Jimmy says about getting an SEO expert involved may be beneficial. Otherwise, this is a really good starter still. And then last but not least is firing up your search console and looking at errors in the index coverage report, right? This is where Google will directly tell you if there's anything that's affecting its ability to crawl. So please, please, please don't forget to look at search console. And really what I've tried to do there is keep it simple SEO, right? That's a pretty in-depth kind of audit checklist that we've gone through in 7 steps of how we can come up with a list of things we need to do. Now, if we look at all the sites, and this is some Semrush data here, they crawled hundreds of thousands of sites here, and they came up with this data on the most common issues that websites have. And the number one most common issue is duplicate content, right? So that's really important that we look at those things, because duplicate content is really going to harm your categories, your products, anything like that. So try and keep that content unique or use something called a canonical tag. Now that we've got a bit of a list, right? We know what we need to do. We've got a list of these items. How do we actually start going in and executing these things? What's important? Because we've done a site audit, but there's offsite, there's search intent, there's so many different things going on. So this is where I like to use an acronym called DIRTY SEO. And this is where it gets fun. So it looks a little something like this. It's a lot, but it is what you're going to need. So we're looking at delivery, so the speed and performance of your website. We're looking at the security, the mobile, the user experience there. We're looking at the infrastructure. So we're looking at the crawlability of your site. Does it have a sitemap, a robots? We're looking at markup, migration, all these different things. Relevance is where we talk about that search intent. You might remember that word I used earlier, IA, which is internal architecture or information architecture, we sometimes call it there. As we can look at the crawl depth, the URL structure, the topical focus or dilution. This just gets me excited every time I look at this stuff. Linkage, content, multimedia, and then lastly, the trust. So the different trust factors we have, which is becoming instrumentally important if you look at EAT, and Semrush has done an amazing job of running a lot of different workshops on EAT, so I would encourage you to get involved because this is just getting massive. So these are the different things, DIRT, or dirt really, but I just added the Y because I think it sounds cool. But this kind of gives you an understanding of different things you're going to need to know when you go to execute. So it's kind of like a pit stop. when we look at executing these different things, don't make the mistake of trying to bite everything off at once, right? Get a team involved or look at different issues and try and address each one as you can, right? Don't try and be the one person going through all these different things. Or if you are, do it in bite-sized chunks. So looking at delivery quickly, is one of the main ones I want to talk about today, and just in the interest of time and giving you some actionable insights. There's a few things we need to know here, and there's a few things that we can instantly check and execute on. So the first, speed and performance. I always say it's not about how fast or being fast enough. It has to be faster, right? The faster we can get that site loading, the better. It's just one of those things you can tick off. So how can you really go up that way?
Harry, we've got an issue with your microphone there, mate. Looks like, yeah, it's blowing out on us. Do you have a different? Try again.
Weird.
That's better. Yes, he is much better.
Weird,
Yeah.
bizarre. Sorry, I was just saying we check out GT metrics over here to check out that site speed. Super actionable. Now, one big thing that I see a lot of people do is they go to Google page speed. Now, Google page speed is awesome, but it gives you really bad numbers. The numbers that it gives you can really throw you off and you're not sure what to do. GT metrics will give you more actionable insights on things that will really move the needle for that page speed. So the first thing you should do is look at this report. Once you get that back, the most common things you're going to see are things like image optimization. If you're on WordPress, you can use things like Smush to fix that. Shopify has, half a dozen billion plugins to fix your images. But make sure you've got some kind of optimization going on there with your images, because I guarantee if you haven't already, it is going to make a massive difference in your page speed. There's all sorts of next-gen image formats you could also use if you really want to squeeze out that last bit of juice, but just often going through and fixing these things can help a lot.
We've got your mic just went a bit funny then, but could you also expand your screen so it's a full screen view? Yeah, the mic is not going well. Have you got a different one there at all, or it's just fuzzing out? But
I don't know why it's doing that. Bizarre. I've actually never had a mic issue on the headset before. Give me 1 sec. I'm just going to refix that.
Yeah. Do you have a different headset or a different?
I do, but not here. Not in the office. Let me just swap the battery. See if that does anything.
Could be a battery. Maybe we will. In the meantime, while we were doing that, Harry, we just got a question here, and perhaps I'll just throw this over to Nick Ranger and Jimmy, just to fill in a bit of time here. So, is GT Metrics better than Pingdom? They give me very different results, says House of Knives. What do you think, Jimmy? What do you think, Nick?
I'll let Jimmy go first if you want, but otherwise I can talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not really like the guy who's using site speed tools every day, to be perfectly honest. I have used them, but they've both been out of my long time. And I would probably use Harry to decide which one I would pick. But I do think GT Metrics is really good for people who don't have as much development kind of experience. Might help you as the user to get a good grip on what the actions actually are if you look at how they lay them out for you, which I really like, before you kind of hand them over to a developer, get a nice level of understanding in the middle. So they're both good tools. I think you get smart people on both sides of that argument that would advocate for each of them. I'll let Harry answer.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me now? Is that any better?
It's still wigging out, but maybe I can sort of like add some insight there. Yeah, so GT metrics and Pingdom. I'm glad you mentioned GT metrics, because that's one that I've been using for quite some time. Just sort of like going in between GT metrics and web page tests and looking at page speed insights, which uses Lantern, which is only something that I've recently become familiar with, and then Pingdom. So if I sort of just like look at like maybe GT metrics versus Pingdom, both of those I think use 7 core different test locations. But I think like with test locations, I think the core takeaway is like, have a look at where is closest to your target audience, because that's going to give you the most accurate representation of like the page load. So because they're sort of similar, that's pretty good. I think as far as like determining the score, so to be honest, it's been a while since I've looked at Pingdom, but I think GT metrics uses like page speed scores and Y-slow scores. But I think there's like different, like it'd be really hard to sort of like compare these tools sort of equally and wonder why they're different from tool to tool. Like while they're sort of like all based on the original open source like Google PageSpeed library, I think some of the key differences should be pointed out. So after Google made some general scoring algorithmic, recommendations, many years ago, they haven't really updated that open source library since. So the Page Speed Score Insights online tool as a whole seems to contain a whole new set of rules, which isn't necessarily open source because it's assigned by Google. I wouldn't compare these tools equally and sort of wonder why the scores differ from tool to tool. They all sort of use different recommendation sets. So just keep that in mind when you're, sort of toggling between tool to tool. I think a lot of SEOs, including, maybe Peter and Harry and, even you, Jimmy, might probably think like it's good to get an overview of a different couple of sets of scores and see if there's like a common denominator between them. I think that's sort of like why you might see some different rules from each of those services and why it's sort of, it's good to be able to have a look at like a varied look when you're assessing the page speed. But if like a couple of the tools also say like, on a base level that you're having some issues, I would definitely look into it, because page speed, of course, is a ranking factor. And from experience, the ranking factor really only starts to come into play when it's sort of like at the critical stage. Peter, I know you've done a lot of work on this as well, but yeah, I would just keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely such an important topic, but any of those tools will help give you a little bit of insight. GT Metrics is a really good tool and it's preferred by a lot of SEOs. But of course, Pingdom is still also a good tool as well. Just kind of depends how you want to work this into your daily working, your schedule, or what tools do you go to when you're working. But of course, let's hand it back over to Harry's. And Harry, let's see how your mic goes.
Yeah, does it sound any better?
Yes, it is better. Before it was going all fuzzy, but let's get back on track, because I can see here speed and performance is the topic. So let's get going.
So what I'm looking at here, guys, is I'm looking at a chart, and one thing changed here. This is back in 2018, but one thing changed in this month, and the only thing that changed was they optimized their speed and performance. I've never seen a nicer ramp that goes up in a month just because someone's optimized that speed and performance. We're not talking a couple hundred sessions. We're talking a decent sized site with 50,000 organic in Semrush. Just absolutely jump off that. So if you needed any more motivation, please have a look at that and see if that's something that you could do from an executional side. Again, you can see nothing's really changed here, just that traffic's gone up through the roof. So lastly, kind of on this speed and performance thing, there's a mobile in Google PageSpeed as well, but there's also a lot of new stuff coming out with the Web Vitals. So I would check those out, do a quick analysis to see if you are in line with those, because that is going to make a major difference coming into 2021. I'm going to skip a couple of that. Now, in the interest of time, we did have a couple technical issues, so apologies for that. The last thing I'll kind of talk about is this idea of infrastructure, right? So we've got that executional side of page speed. We can see that that's going to make a massive difference in our D for delivery. What is one thing we can do for that crawlability side? Well, one thing that we can do is really understand markup. So markup is something that Google's talking about a lot now. The Australian government over here is actually putting some guidelines around it. Same with the US government. So I'd encourage you to look at how your results look in those search engine results page and use some schema or open graph tags to really help enhance that. It's a simple thing, but it does make a massive difference when people are looking at your website, and it makes a massive difference if people click your website or not. So even if you don't improve your rankings at all, having some nice schema there can actually help get more clicks and thus more traffic to your site, which is something that a lot of SEO people don't talk about, but is a quick tip you can do to get more what we call click-through rate. That's about it in terms of the different things I want to talk about here, give you some executional kind of elements. Again, quickly, why bother? You can see a massive ramp on this company just going through this dirty SEO checklist. You can see a massive jump. This is something that we executed with the client as well, and you can see it immediately just greatly increase over time as you start building out those different factors in dirty SEO. If you're a bigger brand, you might be looking at, you might be in the millions of organic hits. Massive company called Officeworks, again, very similar thing. You can see them execute these technical issues and see a massive gain, astronomical gain that we worked through with them. So when we talk about executing these things, it isn't just a nice to have thing that we should do. It is real money that people are leaving on the table when they're not executing these different things. So you can access that dirty SEO checklist and everything at hawkacademy.co. It's all free there, and you can learn a little bit more about going through that audit from top to bottom and executing that in time that we just didn't have today.
Wow, thanks, Harry. That's a lot. Even though you skipped over a lot of slides because we kind of had some technical issues, but certainly the slides, I'm hoping we can have these available on the webinar page afterwards.
Absolutely.
Your slides and also Jimmy's slides, and that'll be available for people to download, and then they can follow up with any further questions later. So
Sorry, I was just going to say in the comments, Semrush Live has said that the slides will be available on the landing page, creating a winning SEO strategy. So,
there is one follow-up question, and that's from Peter Ollison. I mean, you did touch on Core Web Vitals, but the question is a bit specific here. It's saying Core Web Vitals in relation to the usual page speed optimization, and what would you prioritize due to upcoming ranking factor in May? So, Harry, do you have anything further to add that you can just explain a little bit more about the Core Web Vitals and how you would do it differently to the usual?
Well, the biggest thing about Core Web Vitals, which is interesting, is there's two major factors. There's the UI element, which is where they talk about cumulative layout shift, or CLS, which is something you can check there, but not really pertinent to the page speed stuff. The biggest thing that Core Web Vitals really wants to do is decrease the size of pages and make them load faster. So the thing that we spoke about today, optimizing your images, is probably the best way you can decrease the size of that site. So I would highly encourage you, before you look at anything else, to optimize those images. It's such a simple, easy win, but I would estimate that 70 to 80% of websites do not do it.
100%.
Nick Ranger, what have you got? Do you want to add something further, ask some more questions of Harry and Jimmy?
Well, I think, and I'll just sort of quickly just touch on the Core Web Vitals. I think that, they've sort of indicated that's going to be a quote unquote ranking factor, or at least a ranking signal as the page experience signals that they'll be looking at. And I really agree with Harry there, because working on and doing tests of different site speeds on lots of different websites, the first thing is usually like, compress or, optimize the actual media elements. So all your images or your videos and things like that, if that's really, really heavy loading, that's a really, really easy thing to do. So I think that's well covered. I think there was a really great question that someone asked, which was like about long tail keywords, which we'll put out to the group. But most of the time, we've seen a lot of the search intent change for a lot of queries, and they will change throughout the year, whether they're transactional or informational or directional, navigational. I think the first two are sort of like the ones that we sort of generally have the most, keen look at. But I think, consider the user. I think that's a really, really great place to start. So if we want to talk more about long tail keywords, I'll put it to our panelist group. Harry, Jimmy, do you have any thoughts about long tail keywords? Jimmy?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's increasingly important and always has been to write extremely well, right? And that's just what it comes down to. I think there is more and more wisdom throughout the SEO agents, throughout the SEO industry on topic clustering, right? And really deciding how to look at a long string of related keywords and then build out the right cluster of assets for those keywords. So, if the question is, should I be looking to rank for long tail keywords or looking to rank for head terms more frequently, or in your case, that is going to come down to the kind of stuff I was talking about earlier. Like, do you have what you need behind you to go rank for a term like skin lotion today or something like that, right? Or are you really in a situation where that's not going to be possible and you need to prioritize longer tail keywords? Generally, like, if you ignore that and ignore, what can I realistically rank for, and just think, how would I build out the right site?
Oh, we've got a bit of a pause there.
Jimmy's on pause there, so perhaps Nick dropped off. But there is one here from ETC, which says, "Would having AMP pages make a difference rather than just responsive?" And I know that sort of Google is getting sort of back on the bandwagon and continues to push the AMP, pages. What do you think? Is this something that people should consider? I mean, if they can't get their pages fast enough, should they use AMP, or is it just really for publishers who are publishing frequently? What are your thoughts? Tricky one, hey? AMP has been an awful thing for SEOs, but I guess they're still getting pushed, right?
Yeah, it's still getting pushed. Harry, are we able to hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, awesome. I can hear you, yes.
Looking at the company name now, I would say that AMP pages are probably not the way to go. They are going to reduce your tracking substantially. Unless you're a news website or a recipe website, I always say steer clear from AMP. They're great for those two kind of sources, appearing in Google News, all those kind of things. But for everyone else, I've seen massive increases in not doing AMP or transferring away from AMP. So I would encourage you to just squeeze every little bit you can out rather than go to something like AMP, because ultimately it's not going to be beneficial for you. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree with that as well. Like, it's sort of got its own sort of set of rules. It's got its own sort of styling sheets. You can't sort of like have like good branding with it. And the sort of like the myth that it is faster. I've seen some pretty poor performing AMP pages. So again, everything with a grain of salt. And just to pick up what you were saying before, Jimmy, SEO is something that takes a long time, and a lot of this stuff is case by case consideration. We really want to, sorry, GT S1971, we got sucked into the AMP fad. It's again, like, have a look at the performance of those pages, versus your other pages that aren't in AMP, and sort of like, figure out what is best for you. I think, like, anything that if you have like complete control over something, then you're able to optimize it the way that you need it to be specific for your website and specific for your content.
Absolutely. It's always been a bit of a bane of contention with the AMP pages. So perhaps we will quickly just touch on this, more of a comment, I guess, which is GTS 1971. Is it true a 4-second load time will be the new benchmark? Well, I mean, perhaps my personal opinion on this is you want to be faster than 4 seconds. But what do other people think? I'll throw it over to the rest of the experts here on the panel.
Okay, so we've got both Jimmy and Harry on mute. You want to be faster than your competition, right? That sort of sets the benchmark. It's good to know who's doing what in the zoo, but at the same time, I completely agree with you, Peter. You want to have like the best on-page experience possible for users. As Core Web Vitals, as Harry was saying before, comes into effect, really they want to make sure that the page load speed is addressed, so that Google can basically just serve fast loading content. Because I think if your customers are waiting for your pages to load on their mobile experience, they're probably going to bounce. And you'll see this sort of reflected in your Google Analytics, and you'll be like, why aren't we doing well? Whereas if they go to your competitor and they have a better on-page experience, that might be where you might be losing out some clicks. Harry, Jimmy, we've lost Jimmy again, unfortunately.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes, Harry, go.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with Nick. It's one of those things. I don't like definitive numbers though. I don't like it has to be 4 seconds, if that makes sense. Like, if it's fast and it's as minimal as possible, then I would say that's what you want to do. If you've got a ridiculous, page speed because of a reason, maybe the whole page is about an infographic and it's a large infographic, I wouldn't freak out about trying to get that under 4 seconds. But if it's your home page or services pages, those core pages, try and get as fast as possible, definitely.
Yeah.
I want to actually throw across to Jimmy for a minute, because I avoid using the dreaded C word, but of course we are living in a world today which is governed quite a fair bit by COVID-19. And I just wonder, actually, Jimmy, what differences do you do in your strategies now that sort of COVID-19 is such a ruling factor in our daily lives?
I mean, it's a really interesting consideration. I think literally for a lot of our e-commerce clients, there are search-driven product line differences this year, and in a lot of cases, fashion clients that are starting to make masks, clients who are direct-to-consumer kind of distribution companies now bringing on wholly new lines of product as a result of what's happening at a macro level. So we're seeing huge changes in that way. From a strategic standpoint, I think, I don't want to take this outside of SEO, but in reality, you need to think about your marketing budget more broadly than SEO. And you really need to think about, where does SEO fit in now that there is COVID? We've seen a lot of companies who probably were more aggressive in brand spend historically, now really looking to reposition those dollars to growth through content on sites and other SEO mechanisms, because they're just more directly related to what they need right now. So, we've seen a lot of those kinds of changes. And, I think it makes sense for you to think about, is SEO now, in the way that it can return for you over time from a business standpoint, maybe something you should be looking harder at, given the fact that, less sort of bottom funnel initiatives may not be as valuable, or not be as possible, resource restraints as they have been in the past.
I definitely think looking at your budget would be good for this. Harry, I think you're a part of the AWIA board here in Australia, and you're a member of a lot of different business associations, and I think looking at long-term marketing strategies has definitely been one that has come of some good seasoned advice, but I'll let you talk a little bit more about that, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, going back to the AWIA stuff, it's a tricky.
Just jump in. AWIA is the Australian Web Industry Association.
Yeah, sorry.
Should rely on acronym for all the people watching and listening.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is this in terms of the budget stuff, Nick, that you wanted me to really address?
Well, I think in terms of what people can do from a budget sense, just because it was brought up from a macro level, I think it would be really good to sort of have a bit of an idea about what how one can sort of perceive SEO in their budgets.
I mean, looking at all these different associations I'm involved in, it is becoming crazy how significant SEO is. I mean, Peter and I guess everyone here has been doing this for a long time and seen SEO go from an afterthought to, I've got investors as part of YPO or these different associations I'm part of, even coming to the Australian Web Industry Association, and they're looking at SEO when they're valuing businesses. I have, a group of 60-year-old kind of business executives, been CEO all their lives, that sit in a boardroom and pull up someone's Semrush profile. I mean, that if someone told me that was going to happen 5-6 years ago, I would have called them insane. But now it's a daily occurrence that someone will pull up their Semrush profile and see the organic. So in terms of SEO as an investment, it's evolved a lot more from change some meta descriptions, hope for the best. Now it's really how do we make this the forefront of our brand? As ad costs go up on Facebook, on Google Ads, as different targeting options are reduced, as we decommission cookies, what can I do as a brand? And SEO is becoming more and more that frontline winner of building a brand. When people go to buy your brand, they're buying your SEO, and conversely as well. So it really is something that if you don't have money for, as a business owner, you now still need to do, which is a lot of the feedback we're getting now. It's become an intrinsic part of marketing.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'd like to, we're at this sort of time in the show where we're nearly over. And normally what I do is go around and ask each member on the panel for their 1 minute takeaway. And perhaps we'll start with Nick Ranger, because she also had a comment to add. And perhaps Nick, you can give us your comment and also give us your 1 minute takeaway. What would be the top number one thing that people can go away and do to really kick their strategy into gear for 2021?
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. So SEO is, we're thinking about users first. So if, in a world of a pandemic where foot traffic has basically been absorbed, everyone's going back online, yes, SEO definitely becomes a lot more of something that people are focusing on. And like Harry said, boardrooms are showing up Semrush profiles about their competitors and about themselves, which is, for us, awesome, and also, we need to work hard. But for people, what are some good actionable takeaways from this? Look at your, if you rely on foot traffic, look at Google My Business, change your business hours, and to be able to have temporarily closed, you can be able to set special hours. you can also add like a bit of a COVID-19 update to your post if that's relevant to you, about what are your things about closures, reduced hours, safety, hygiene practices, or even diversify the way your revenue streams. I know a lot of my clients have really up to their potential to be able to have gift cards and vouchers and things like that. Editing your business description is really, really great. Having a schema for special attributes for service availability, particularly for shopping-based businesses, to have business profiles to be able to inform customers about service availability. So I'm trying to smash this through as fast as possible. And also adding a booking to call action on Google My Business as well. But heaps of things you can do for 2021: backlinks, content, technical SEO. All right, on to the next one.
The trifecta. Thanks so much, Nick, and thanks for co-hosting today. Your expertise is very much appreciated on the show. Jimmy, do you have a very quick 1 minute takeaway, just a top level item? If they did one thing that mattered, what would it be?
Yeah, backlinks, content, and technical in that order. Agree 100%. And I would just say, I might challenge everyone to take a look at some people using Semrush who have either taken market share from you in 2020 and previous years, or who have grown when you haven't. Look at exactly how they've done that by dissecting their sites, what's around their sites, their approaches, and challenge yourself to see whether you can do that or not. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks so much for joining us, Jimmy, and your input has been so valuable. I'm sure there'll be people rewatching this video and looking at your slides to get further information. So, yeah, Harry, what would you give us for your top level 1 minute takeaway if it's just a one thing that people went away and put into practice?
Yeah. Go away and do that audit that I showed you, that 7-step kind of audit. Have a look at that. Pick a few issues out there, the errors of different things. I mean, you can Google around. You can head to Hawk Academy. There's all sorts of explanations there, and start tipping away at those. That's going to make the biggest difference for you. That page speed thing's another thing, but really go do that audit and put that into Jimmy's plan, and you've already got a great plan of attack there.
Fantastic advice, and thanks so much for joining us, Harry. Your expertise and your experience is really great to have it on the show. So with that,
the only one we haven't thanked, sorry, I just have to get in there. The only one we haven't thanked is you, Peter. Peter is a godfather of SEO here in Australia, and a source of a deep pool of wealth of knowledge, information, and expertise. So thank you so much for hosting, Peter.
Wow, and thanks for that. And thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for the audience and the questions. Please feel free to follow us up. There was another question that we didn't quite get a time to answer. Please message us and we'll do our best. Other than that, we'll see you next time. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.